Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahla. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Jazakumullah khair for joining us once again in our weekly session on the book Risalatul Mustarshideen by Imam Abu al-Harith or Imam al-Harith al-Muhasibi alayhi rahmatullah. We're just going to continue from where we left off inshallah last week, and the author was making some very important points regarding some character traits that we as Muslims should all try and adopt and to try and make seasoned so we are ready for the accountability and ready for the meeting on the Day of Judgment. So the author, he mentions and he says, وَنَفَعَنَ اللَّهُ بِعُلُومِهِ فِي الدَّارَيْنِ, and may Allah enable us to benefit from his knowledge. Ameen. He said, وَاحْمِلَ الْقَلْبَ عَنْ سُوءِ الظَّنِّ بِحُسْنِ التَّأْوِيلِ. We kind of touched upon this last week a little bit as well. So the author, he says, always protect the heart from always having bad thoughts or deep suspicions, negative suspicions. And he says you do that بِحُسْنِ التَّأْوِيلِ. He mentions you do that by always giving a good and positive interpretation to events. So for example, you see somebody doing something that's questionable or something that is outright wrong. Try as much as is possible to try and give a good interpretation or a reasonable interpretation for what it is, why they did what they did. Okay, so this is what we call husnul dhan. So you look at somebody, they did something you consider would be wrong, but then perhaps it was because of this. You try and find an excuse in order to kind of absolve this person from what you think or what you've done, what you assume that they've done is wrong or what is wrong. And there was actually a athar which Allahu a'lam, Allah knows best whether or not it's authentic. But there was a athar that some of the early scholars would always transmit regarding Isa alayhi salam, in which one day Isa alayhi salam, he went into a marketplace and he saw somebody stealing something. And when he saw somebody stealing something, he went to him and he asked him, "Did you steal?" And then the person swore by Allah and said, "By Allah, I did not steal anything." So then Isa alayhi salam responded and said, if that's the case, I believe in the statement when somebody makes a statement making an oath by Allah, and I suspect my eyes. So he said, I suspect my eyes in these circumstances. Because if somebody said wallahi, or somebody used Allah's name, then it means that that's the best interpretation we can give. Even if it means that I saw something with my own eyes, I suspect my eyes. So that's what he said, which is very interesting, because it doesn't really mean that you didn't see what you saw. You didn't see what you, but you give an excuse as much as you can. And this is something that really, if we were to practice in our everyday lives, it would actually be much closer to allowing said person who made a mistake to reach a better position and to come back to Allah, rather than condemnation and accusations or allegations of being bad and evil and whatnot, which would only drive people further away. So ultimately, sometimes it's always good to ask, for what reason am I going to be antagonistic towards so-and-so due to a mistake that they've made? Is it because I just want to blame them? Or is it because I want to humiliate them? Is it because I have something to gain? If that's the case, then that's problematic, because it will only it will only further away any chance that this person would actually reciprocate any kind of anything towards you. So our responsibility is that we try and, if our intention is that we want good for this person, then we do so many things which are different than what we do today. So we would try and say a good word, or we will try and say, we'll try and not make the person assume that they are somebody who's God-forsaken, somebody who's completely lost, or somebody who has no hope left. But there's a way in which we kind of should be dealing with these kind of things. So the author, he says, always protect your heart, and ultimately it's not just about protecting that person, it's also about protecting yourself, because it's never good to think evil of somebody, because once that gets into the soul and once that gets into the heart, it kind of corrupts the heart and it makes the heart always assume bad things about people. So no matter what happens, this is just one person, but if it happens again or a couple of times after, it will grow accustomed to always thinking the worst until the person becomes absolutely cynical, to the point in which they will always interpret something good to be bad. So whenever somebody does something good, even if it's something really praiseworthy, they will attempt to disregard it as if there was nothing. And they will always assume the worst in people. So it's always good, it's always good that even if a person does something bad, to assume good. And Imam Abu Hanifa, he said something really amazing. And wallahi, this is especially something that I think is one of the most important things, or one of the most important ways of thinking, that we should adopt this kind of mindset. He said, Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, for me to make a mistake in adding 100 people and assuming 100 people are Muslim when they're really not, is more beloved to me than assuming one person to be a non-Muslim when he's really a Muslim. So I'm going to repeat that, inshallah. He said, I'd rather make a mistake by adding and assuming 100 people are Muslim when they're really not Muslim, than to what? Than to assume that one person is a non-Muslim when they're really a Muslim. And that just comes, it might be an exaggerated way of speaking about an issue, but the point that he's making is that having a good opinion is far better than having a bad opinion. Even if your good opinion of somebody is actually mistaken, even then it's better. Because it's much better that you have a good opinion of somebody, even though it is contrary to what you think, even if the reality is contrary to what you think, than having a bad opinion of somebody and that bad opinion proves to be wrong. Okay, so that's something which is very important. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِن جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا أَن تُصِيبُوا قَوْمًا بِجَهَالَةٍ ثُمَّ فَتُصْبِحُوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلْتُمْ نَادِمِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that whenever news comes to you regarding anything, or especially about somebody, always try and verify if that is actually the reality. Especially because nowadays people transmit news and people transmit information without verification. So we're living in the age of fake news. So much things that are out there that's not reliable and not verified. So if that's the case, be very careful as to what you transmit. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he even said, it's enough for a person to be considered a kadhab bima yarwi bikulli ma sami', because he relates she relates everything that they hear without any process of verification. So it's very important that we're very careful as to the news that reach, how we deal with these kind of things, because if you accuse somebody or you say something about somebody which is wrong, which is actually wrong, then that is enough to destroy a relationship beyond repair in many cases. So it's very important to be very careful. And to assume good of somebody who is far from good is much better, and it's more safe to assume somebody is evil or has done something wrong, or to make that judgment when that's not the case. That's always take that as a principle. So the author then, he said, وَادْفَعِ الْحَسَدَ بِقَصْرِ الْأَمْرِ. We touched upon this a little bit last week. He says, remove enmity or envy from yourself by reducing the hopes that you have. Meaning, kind of remove the hopes that you have in this worldly life. Because usually, what are the things that we become envious of? People's wealth, people's status, people's well-being. These are the kind of things that people mostly have envy for. So when they see somebody who's extremely rich, or when they see somebody who's doing extremely well in their lives, these are areas in which they feel envious. This is the times that these are circumstances when people, but you don't know what this person is going through. You don't know if they're in a good state. You only see the good. You don't see the difficulties. We don't see people's difficulties many times. That's why we live in a time, or we live in an age of social media, where all you need to do is you just need to log on, and everybody kind of shows you their best life. They don't show you the good. They don't show you. They show you their best life and the best things that are happening in their lives. They're only displaying to you what they want. It's a filtered type of medium in which they only show you one angle, and sometimes that one angle can only possibly only amount to maybe 3% of their entire life, or even less. But that's what we judge people upon, and that's what and our process of judgment is based on that which we see on social media and anywhere and other places. So we don't ever see the difficulties in these people's lives. We don't see, and we don't understand some of their experiences. We don't see all of the bad. We only see that which we interpret to be good. So because of that, it's very easy to fall into being envious, thinking, you know what, this person has it made. You know, this person is living their best life. This person, blah, blah, X, Y, Z. But we don't see the difficulties. So we start assuming that we're the only ones who go through difficulties and everybody else is having a good time. What's wrong with me? Why am I going through all of these issues? What's happening to me? Why has Allah abandoned me? So it's very, very easy to be deceived, especially in the online age nowadays. Very easy to be deceived. And a person should always understand that that's not the reality. Everything you see online is nothing more than a facade. It's an actual facade. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions and He calls the whole world a facade. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. And this worldly life is nothing but deception. Everything is deceptive. Nothing is very difficult to verify anything nowadays. So be very careful as to what you assume, especially through what you see from people. Because we don't know what we're envious for. We don't know. If we were to know the actual reality of it, we might say, you know what, I don't want this. And that's because of a lack of knowledge that we have. Okay? وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And you have not been given knowledge except a small amount. So we always assume things. We look at people through our own prism, through our own interpretation of their lives. And that's what we want to adopt, and that's what we want for ourselves. Not knowing that that which we see from them is only a fraction of their entire experience. And you don't get to see all of the difficulties and all of the hardships and all of the horrible stuff and all of the bad stuff and all of the negative stuff. And had you been presented all of it as one package, you yourself might reject it and not want it if you actually knew the reality. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what He gives to His servants. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in an ayah in the Quran, Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalata. Allah knows best whom He gives the message, who He chooses as a messenger. Wallahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. Allah knows, but you don't know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. So always bear that in mind. Then He says, one fil kibra, remove arrogance, bistibtan al-izz, by hiding and by concealing and constraining any feelings of pride. That's one way to do it, see, is concealing it, because what comes out is what manifests as arrogance. Okay, but if a person kind of is conscious of what they're doing and they're able to constrain themselves, even in those, we're human beings, there are times in which maybe we want to feel honored, we want to kind of give the impression of being, you know, something maybe a little bit better than our actual reality. This is just part of the human experience. But our responsibility, and this is the beauty of our religion, is that everything comes with guidance and everything has restraints and constraints. So we have to always, tilka hududullah. These are the boundaries of Allah. So we have boundaries that we need to keep all the time. Then He says, وَاتْرُكْ كُلَّ فِعْلٍ يَضُرُّكَ إِلَى اعْتِذَارٍ. He says, stay away from or leave off any action, okay, that would cause you or force you ila i'tidarin, or that will cause you to have to make an excuse. Okay? وَاتْرُكْ كُلَّ فِعْلٍ يَضُرُّكَ أو يَضُرُّكَ إلى اعتذار. So Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, he mentioned and he explained this statement and he said, إِيَّاكَ وَمَا يَسْبِقُ إِلَى الْعُقُولِ إِنْكَارُهُ وَإِنْ كَانَ عِنْدَكَ اعْتِذَارُهُ. So he mentioned, he said, be very careful of something which comes into your mind in which you wish to condemn very easily without you also having an excuse for it. So always be ready to make an excuse. Okay? Always find a reasonable excuse for somebody who you feel has done something wrong, instead of always coming into condemnation mode. You know, that aggression of condemnation, refutation, speaking ill of, always, you know, making an allegation. Before you come into that mode, come into the mode, he's saying, of i'tidar, overlooking, you know, making an excuse for them. You know, always finding a good interpretation. These are things which are, these are characteristics which are lost today. You know, and you know, the social media, or the, you know, these online platforms has only made things much worse. So you see people behaving in the most outrageous ways online today, simply because of the fact that we haven't internalized all of this knowledge. We haven't internalized what you know, these books that hold all of these wisdoms. We haven't internalized them at all. We haven't taken these as a way of guidance. We haven't taken it as a means of seeking Allah's pleasure. So it's not a surprise now to see that people have completely lost the plot and completely have become things which they shouldn't have. So it's kind of very, very scary times we're living in. وَجَانِبْ, the author, he says, وَصُنْ دِينَكَ بِالْإِقْتِدَاءِ, protect your religion by always bil-iqtida. Il-iqtida means following, meaning following the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. Indeed, in the Messenger of God, you have the best example. For the one, لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ, for the one who has a hope in God, the last day, and the one who remembers Allah frequently. And for those who want to remember Allah and do dhikr of Allah. Then the author, he says, وَاحْفَظْ أَمَانَتَكَ بِطَلَبِ الْعِلْمِ, protect your status and your trust by seeking knowledge. Because by knowledge we understand that we as Muslims have to always be people who are upright and people who are trustworthy. Okay? Through knowledge we come to that understanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions in the Quran that we have to return the rights and we have to be trustworthy. أوفوا بالعقود, always fulfill your oaths and your contracts. You know, your end of the bargain, you must be ready to fulfill your part, your end of the bargain, your responsibilities. That's what it means. And the author, he mentions and he says, وَحَصِّنْ عَقْلَكَ وَحَصِّنْ عَقْلَكَ بِآدَابِ أَهْلِ الْحِلْمِ, and purify your intelligence and your rationale by adopting the etiquettes of the people who have hilm. Hilm can be interpreted in different ways. Many a times the interpreters interpret it as being kind, soft, people who overlook. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Halim. So hilm is something which is very, very important. And one of the ways in which we can become like that, or we can adopt and we can bring clarity to our own rationale in the way we do things, is by adopting these kind of characteristics. To overlook sometimes, it's sometimes the best thing that you can do. And that kind of gives you insight also, because it gives you an experience and then you learn to know how to deal with people. The author says, وَاسْتَعِدَّ الصَّبْرَ لِكُلِّ مَوْطٍ, prepare patience for every situation. Life is all about trial. Life is all about tribulation. Life is all about difficulty. Life is all about challenges. And because this is a fact of life and this is a reality, be prepared and prepare yourself to be patient for anything that life may throw at you. That's what the author is saying here. Because it's very brutal. Sometimes you might experience something which is horrific, and this is the human experience. something which is an unrelenting tragedy. Our responsibility then is that we try and make of it as best as we can. We try and accommodate our feelings towards the situation as best as possible. We can't change what happens. That's not within our ability to do so. We're human beings. We know our limits. So then try and be patient in these kind of things. And one of the ways in which we can be patient is by putting things into perspective. Just understanding that this life wasn't meant to be good for anybody. It wasn't meant to be an abode of tranquility and peace and quiet and a paradise. It wasn't supposed to be like that. So once we kind of understand that and internalize that, then we don't really have much hope in life anyway, which is really how it should be, because the whole point of Islam and the main theme of Islam is the afterlife. That's the whole point. It's not about this life. This is the worst kind of existence. According to the Islamic tradition, this is the lowliest type of existence that we can have as a species. We can't go lower than this. This is dunya. Dunya in the Arabic language comes from the word danat. Danat could mean something which is low, and it could also mean something which is low and something which is right at the bottom. And the danat, something filthy, can also mean something filthy. So we're living in the worst kind of existence possible as human beings. Meaning anything from here is only, inshallah, if we do well in this worldly life, can only be better. So anything, inshallah, after this will be better, inshallah. If we follow the guide, if we follow the injunctions of divine revelation and the prophetic tradition. وَاسْتَعِدَّ الصَّبْرَ لِكُلِّ مَوْطٍ. So prepare and accommodate patience in your life as a characteristic for any situation that may arise. وَالْزَمْ الْخَلْوَةَ بِالذِّكْرِ. And always make sure that you accompany your lone time, meaning the time that you're by yourself, with remembrance, meaning remembrance of Allah. In those times when you're by yourself, when you're not doing nothing, or when there's nothing to distract you, let it be a habit that you do something or you say something in which you remember your Lord. And there's something which is very, very important and very good, because it keeps that relationship alive. And it's also something in which you can do that's got nothing to do with showing off. So it's something which is very sincere. And that's kind of the test of sincerity comes into play in these kind of moments. So in the moments in which you are by yourself and you're not with anybody, and it's just you and yourself and nobody else with you, in those circumstances, then that's when sincerity is really put to trial, and that's when sincerity, it will really be known. What do you do when you're by yourself? It's easy to pray when everybody else is praying around you, because you don't really have much of a choice, and everybody wants to make sure that they don't look bad in front of anyone else. But what do you do when you're by yourself, when there's nobody watching and it's just you by yourself? So what they're saying, in those momentary times in your life where you're not doing nothing and you're by yourself, don't distract yourself with YouTube. Don't distract yourself with going online all the time. Don't distract yourself with all of these gadgets. Don't distract yourself with all of these things. Try and put yourself in a situation in which you try and just remove yourself and unwind and completely come to terms with your surroundings. And the best way in which you can do that is by remembering Allah and doing your dhikr. Then he says, وَاسْحَبِ النَّعَمْ or وَاسْحَبِ النِّعَمْ بِالشُّكْرِ. He says, the author, وَاسْحَبِ النِّعَمِ بِالشُّكْرِ. Always accompany bounties and favors with gratitude. So whenever something good happens to you in your life, always be grateful. So let not a good thing ever happen to you in your life except that you are grateful for that thing that you've just experienced. Any good that comes to you, say Alhamdulillah. Why? Because this is one of the means in which you can gain more blessings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are grateful, then I will increase you. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are grateful, I will increase you, meaning in blessings. So be grateful, and then you will get more of that which you love and more of that which you enjoy. Then he says, وَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ فِي كُلِّ أَمْرٍ. Always seek Allah's assistance in every situation. Because we need Allah. We are a creation which is dependent. We are dependent upon Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ أَنْتُمُ الْفُقَرَاءُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ هُوَ الْغَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ. O mankind, you are the ones who are in need of your Lord. And Allah is rich, free of all needs, full of praise, deserving of all praise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that really we are the ones who need Allah. Allah does not need us. So if that's the case, then always seek Allah's assistance in everything that you do. Make sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala factors in greatly to any situation that you are involved in, so that you may reap the benefits and gain that which is good. And if you don't gain something, then at least that was upon knowledge, and then you know, and then you're comforted by the fact that despite me seeking Allah's assistance for this thing, Allah did not grant it to me, therefore it must not be good for me, or therefore it might not have been for me anyway. See, that's the mindset that we kind of need to develop. That even in times of, so even in those times in which we are not given anything, in times of loss, or and those times in which we are not given what we want, we kind of understand why, and we resign ourselves to Allah's knowledge. That would be excellent if we did. It's difficult to do, but if we did, that would be great. وَاسْتَخِرِ اللَّهَ فِي كُلِّ حَالٍ. Always seek Allah's counsel in every situation or every condition. If you want to do something in your life, you don't know whether this thing is good for you or bad for you, pray istikhara. Pray istikhara. So that's what the author is saying here. Meaning istikhara is when you seek Allah's counsel for those things in every situation. So don't let it be, whether it's a big decision or whether it's a small decision, always do your best, or always try, or always make sure that you do istikhara. So then he says, وَمَا أَرَادَكَ اللَّهُ لَهُ فَاتْرُكَ الْإِعْتِرَاضَ فِيهِ. And this is something which is very important and it's very difficult. The author, he says, and that which Allah wants for you, then stop disputing those issues. Clearly, through experience, you've come to understand, okay, I've tried my best in this situation, I've did so much, and for whatever reason, I'm being tilted towards another direction. Except that, especially if you prayed istikhara and you it's exactly what you were expecting Allah's answer, and you were tilted in a completely different direction. Don't dispute it, embrace it. Don't dispute it, but embrace it instead. Perhaps that which you have been tilted towards might be that which is good for you. Maybe that's where the good lies. So maybe that's the best place for you. And you might not understand it now, but maybe everything in the future might come into perspective. But we'll only know if we actually don't dispute and actually try and go towards that direction. Otherwise, we would never know. It's always important for us to look into everything in perspective, and not only through the lens of our own frame of mind or our own frame of thought. Because in doing so, it would mean that we have not really put our trust in Allah, and that's not where we want to be, and that's not the journey that we want to go on. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. May Allah bless all of us. May Allah protect all of us. Jazakumullah khair for joining us in this session, inshallah. We'll continue next week. May Allah bless you. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.